Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's regular council meeting of Monday, July the 8th. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the territory of the Sauk Nation, and as we were recently just at one of their events, we wish them the most success that they've had in the past in the years to go ahead, and we look forward to more opportunities in the years to come. Before we get started in tonight's meeting, we do wish to do a tribute to Councillor Brenda Parkinson. It is with great sorrow that I formally announce that on June 28th, around 2:30, Councillor Brenda Parkinson passed away. And on behalf of council, the district, staff, we send our most deepest condolences to her family, her friends, acquaintances, supporters, many loved ones, near and far. We know that Brenda has deep roots in our community, and we are so very grateful for the many contributions that she had made in our community in the past, the present, and many things yet to bloom that we will share in the years to come. There is a poem that Wendy Morton, our poet laureate, had written for Brenda, and I thought I would just share that with you now. And it reads, "You paint a couple embracing in the snow, a red truck with a rooster, poppies, pears, a foggy meadow. And now in this meadow of your life, you celebrate each day, its pain and joy, and on its uncertain path, you embrace us." I thought that was very nice. As some of Brenda's friends may know, and I know there's some in this room, and her brother had made a post on her Facebook page, and I spoke with her family on the weekend, and her mother acknowledged that it was okay for me to read that, so I thought I would share that with you now. So this is from her brother, Jimmy Clark. "Thank you all so much from my family and me personally. I asked my sister before her death if it was okay to share on Facebook and let you in on her last days. Brenda was good with that and knows we both share a good number of amazing friends, both past and present. Her tumor was terminal. Treatment proved futile, although they gave it a college try. Brenda Stewart and her physicians knew this, and she made every day count as it was her normal life. Aggressive as it was, she was driven to be in control and to take charge to her last breath. Self-discharged, she set up camp at her home and prepared for a previously self-initiated costume ball with family, friends, and colleagues to say goodbye and to be remembered as she lived. It was a party and a celebration, and then home in her remaining days spent with immediate family with peace and reflection. Stuart and Brenda carved out a great home in Sooke near the ocean with a quiet forest, wildlife daily, in what turned out to be a sunny week as she bravely faced her final day. Brenda was committed towards contributing to her community and having a positive impact on lives, and in this regard, she succeeded in spades." There's a few more announcements that I would like to make about Brenda, but at this moment, what we would like to do is I'm going to light this candle, and the candle will burn through the duration of the meeting, unless it triggers a heat sensor. I don't think it will, but I guess we're in a good location. And yeah, she would. And then we all have a flower that we'll put in the vase for Brenda. As I know, Councillor Parkinson's favorites were roses, peonies, and poppies, just big, romantic, colorful blooms. So I will do that now, and then we'll do this in turn. I would just like to take a brief moment of silence from everyone, please. A few things to share is that as the district plans this year's Community in Bloom's event, as you know, Brenda was one of the main organizers that spearheaded and really kept our 5 Bloom tradition going. And so this year, as we're preparing this year's event, we do have Brenda in mind, and we will be dedicating this year's event to the memory of Councillor Parkinson. Those of you that were at the Philharmonic Fling the other day would know that that was made a tribute to Brenda as well. And I'll share that while Brenda had her celebration of life with family and friends, we are in the process of putting together a community memorial with the permission of her family to celebrate and to thank Brenda for her many public achievements. And so we'll be looking to have that in early August. In addition to that, I do feel that it is Council's responsibility and duty to sustain Councillor Brenda Parkinson's various appointments, and also to continue with the events and programs that she so willingly put together and organized, and to also follow up on any outstanding resolutions that we may have in our files here. We know that these are very important both to Brenda Parkinson but also to the community as a whole, and they're things that we need to continue doing on. So thank you everyone for just taking that moment at the start of tonight's meeting. I just briefly have to switch gears in my head to shift into the regular meetings. Just give me a second here. Perhaps I'll ask while I'm doing that if any councillors have any words that they would like to share. Anything at this time? Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, I can't overemphasize what a loss it is to our community and to us as a council. We started off this year with quite a team, and we still work at a team concept, and we lost a team member, and it's very hard. But she's with us in spirit, and we'll look after her legacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beddoes. For those of you wondering why the bear is here, you may know from earlier meetings, every member of council was given a bear by the BYLAWS group. And I had kept Councillor Parkinson's bear here because I had assumed that she would be returning, and I wanted to have it here for when she returned. I know that Councillor Parkinson would always wear a brooch, so that's why the bear has one on. A bit of bling as well. So thank you, Ms. Weir, for helping me with that. So as we move into the business portion of tonight's meeting, you'll see a new face sitting with staff, and so I would like to announce and thank our new arrival here. Our new Chief Administrative Officer, Mr. Norm McInnes, has joined us from Fernie. Welcome, Mr. McInnes. I know that Mr. McInnes is in the process of settling into Sooke, and we're grateful to have you aboard as you explore and get to know our community, and we extend a warm welcome from Council. I also wish to thank the candidate crew, all the volunteers, organizers, and businesses. As you know, Councillor Parkinson was involved in the planning of that event, and we thank everyone for putting together such an awesome day. And we look forward to working with many of you as we now plan for our community picnic and movie night, which will be held on Saturday, August the 17th. We're pleased to share that our feature movie will be Avengers Endgame. We also know our fire department has been extremely busy, very long day on Canada Day for sure. And while it did rain in spots, it's still extremely dry, and they've been attending to some unfortunate events both inside and outside our boundaries. So we're very thankful for our crew there. And then finally, over the weekend, I observed a rather dense settlement of some 4,000 individuals, up to 5,000 it seems daily, just outside our boundary. And while they're sending in troops to explore the various myths and legends around our community, it's not an invasion, rather it's rather friendly. And of course, I'm talking about Scouts Canada and the Pacific Jamboree that is being held here. I was fortunate to be at this Jamboree's opening event, and I'm very honored actually, because Jamborees take a significant amount of time planning, and they're held in one location for 2 cycles. So you'll know in 2015 the event was here, and then of course it returned 2019. Well, after that it's going to move to a different location for those 2 events, and then another location before it returns back to Sooke. So I'm quite honored that I've been able to attend both of these events while they've been held in our community. All of the Jamborees scouts are given this necker that during the ceremony they put on. Each individual scout troop has a specific color, and then they all put this on to show that they're one together. And then some of the leaders kind of joked, well, now we'll never find our kids, and because they're all wearing the same one. And of course, badge trading is very popular, so that was really nice to attend. And since I heard yesterday at the Philharmonic, because the event was rained out of the Ed McGregor Park, some scouts happened to pass through, and as the organizers there were stacking chairs, the scouts all lent a hand and quickly helped with the setup and the organization. So they were invited to attend the fling, and I encountered them later on the road as they were waiting for their bus, and they really enjoyed the experience there, so I thought that was quite serendipitous. So I'd like to thank all of the volunteers and all of our businesses that are supporting this event. So that's what I have for announcements. So on this time, Council, if I could turn your attention to tonight's agenda, please. And we'll be looking for approval of the agenda as it's presented, please. Moved by Councillor Beddoes and seconded by Councillor St-Pierre. Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. We have adoption of meeting minutes from June 24th of 2019. Move adoption by Councillor Bateman and seconded by Councillor St-Pierre. Any corrections or questions? Seeing none? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. And then that leads us into our delegation portion. We have 2 delegations tonight. Our first one would be the CRD Foodlands Access Program, and we have 5 minutes. And thank you for joining us today. It was at Council's request that we receive a delegation from the CRD, so we thank you very much for joining us here tonight. Sorry, just need you to turn your microphone there. There we go.
Going back, in 2016, the CRD adopted a regional food and agriculture strategy, and that was a result of 4 years worth of consultation with the agricultural sector and community. And through that, there was the appointment of a regional food and agriculture task force. And the task force was asked to prioritize the recommendations of that strategy. And in doing so, they came forward with, they prioritized the need for land access to be the number 1 priority in their assessment. So when this was brought forward to the Capital Regional District, the board moved forward with direction to examine a broad range of options for assisting agriculture in the region, including potential costs and report back. And they also added a $30,000 budget to that ask. So after the RFP was let to Uplands Consulting, and Ione Smith won the contract and was able to move forward with a broad sweeping literature review for ways to assist agriculture. And she also completed a wide range of consultation amongst the farmers in the agricultural sector, again asking to determine what the needs were in the community. And again, it came forward that land access was a need and a priority. And so she went to work and looked at land access tools across North America. So what she came back with was an analysis of 7 tools. The 7 tools were the regulation of farm leases, farmland ownership restrictions, like BC assessment, farmland tax policy, incubator farms, land connecting services, land banks, and land trusts. And her recommendation came forward as a land trust. So the report goes into various scenarios and cost estimates about how to run a land trust and the programs that are associated with it. What became very apparent right off the bat is that it's very difficult to provide a cost estimate without a specific piece of land, because land is so variable in terms of the hard costs and infrastructure that are required. So she could provide an accurate estimate of the soft cost, but until there was a piece of land that was proposed to be put forward by the local government for use, it was very difficult to cost out. So she provided a range of what could be done in a number of scenarios, and the scenarios are just that. They're a framework to give people an idea of what the different scenarios could look like. And so what we're doing at this point is canvassing municipalities to determine if there's any interest in supporting the project outright, and the ability to contribute financially or a piece of land. So what we've found, and we've had quite a few responses so far, is that there is quite a lot of interest. Not all municipalities are interested in or have land to contribute. Not all have finances to contribute just yet, but we found that many are interested in the concept as a whole and moving forward from that perspective, which adds a layer of complexity for staff, but it's also interesting to see the interest. Leading into the study of the Food and Farmland Trust, we did get unsolicited letters of support from North Saanich, Central Saanich, Sydney, and Saanich before we went forward with the project, along with the Peninsula Ag Commission. And so we've worked with those staff members who we knew were interested along the way to understand what municipal interests could look like. So after we receive this feedback and input, we'll be going back to the CRD board with a summary of the input and the desire from local governments to determine how we might be able to move forward. Again, I will emphasize that this is very much a framework and meant to provide suggestions and recommendations based on the research and real world experiences of food and farmland trusts across North America. There's some differences between the programs and the farms, and there is a very, very definite distinction that needs to be understood between those two. They're not the same thing. So I will leave. I'll stop on that point there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Weightman. Council, we had discussed this earlier this year and then just wanted a presentation on it, so I'll just turn to you if you have any outstanding questions or you'd like to raise. Councillor Beddoes?
Yes, I have the first question would be, now this is not available to established farmers. It's going to be people that have never farmed before?
The idea is that it would be for people that have difficulty accessing farmland. So yes, new farmers would be targeted first of all.
I guess where I have that problem, maybe you can help me, because you obviously said you can't do a costing because you have to have a piece of land and see what it is. But when you cut out established farmers that have all the equipment, they have the tractors, they have the balers, they have all that equipment, and then to possibly lease it out at, and I understand your first brief said you leased it out at the going rate, or whatever that is, I'm not even sure what that is, then these sort of new farmers have to come up with all this equipment. And I thought that might be better served if we had farmland to offer it to established farmers. The idea is to get production off it, is it not?
Yeah, so there was a bit of a discussion throughout the consultation about where it would be best suited. And so one of the recommendations of the report actually says not to have all new farmers. So you would have mostly new farmers or people that have a small piece of farming experience. And then you would also have 1 or 2 small parcels that you could lease out to established farmers A, for knowledge flow, and B, to have a bit of understanding of what equipment is available and needed. There is also a very detailed infrastructure section in the report that goes into a lot of costing about what infrastructure could be made available through the cost estimates that were provided. So in terms of tractors and balers and wash stations and stuff like that, that was considered in some of the infrastructure costs, and it was attempted to try and include some opportunity for some knowledge flow between experienced farmers and young farmers.
And the other question is on housing. My understanding, to have a viable farm operation, even a small farm, the farmer and family and helpers need to be on the land. And a lot of this land that I see that is available for the land bank, most of it's out in the central Saanich area. We don't have any here at all. You know, there's no houses on it. So, I mean, would they be building these people a house, or what is there, or is that up to when we find some land? I guess that needs to be worked out, eh?
Yeah, through the mayor, it's a little bit more. It's not anticipated at this time that there would be housing on the Foodlands Trust.
Okay, thank you. Answer my questions.
Councillor St-Pierre?
As a small farmer myself, I appreciate the challenges of actually accessing land, and am obviously favor of anything that actually allows us to achieve better food security in these times. I'm curious, however, about lands that already exist in the Parklands Trust that are suitable for agriculture and that might be fallow at this point in time, including land in Sooke. Because I know that the CRD actually owns, for example, a parcel on the Sooke River that was purchased because it's environmentally sensitive, but it used to be a farm. I know because we went to a little auction there and bought our sites, so I know that there's a farm right there. What would the model, would this model allow that particular land to be put into agricultural production? What might that look like? And if there were farmers or individuals in Sooke that wanted to make their land available in some way or other, who actually decides who's on the land, how the land gets used? Is that in cooperation with the district? Is that strictly CRD? How does that look at this point in time?
Okay, yeah, thank you. Through the mayor, in terms of CRD land, it's not anticipated that any would be used at this time. You're right, there are a number of CRD parks that do have, that are former farms and do have agricultural land potential. It's a topic that came before CRD Parks Commission years ago, and then there wasn't any interest. I don't know if it's been on the agenda since then. So that could be certainly a piece of feedback that you could provide in comments for with regards to what we're asking for the land access program. In terms of who decides which farmers go where, it's anticipated that there's going to be a program advisory committee that's made up of individuals who are part of the CRD board and amongst the community who would be able to make a decision as to who is appropriate to go on the land based on a set of criteria that's determined through the development of the framework for the program.
Councillor Bateman?
Okay, thank you. I'm curious about a few things. First of all, Saanich is in a position to donate Panama Flats, and I think North Saanich is looking at Sandown, at least a portion of that property. Would this mean that those two municipalities would get the first action on this new Foodlands Trust? I ask this because we don't have land to donate, and I think if we are to say yes, we're looking at adding perhaps $1.50 or less to our annual CRD tax bill.
Yeah, through the chair, I don't think that the municipality that provides the land is the sole proprietor of the Foodlands Trust. It would still benefit, and still farmers and members of the community would still be able to access those lands and programs and supports as part of the program as a whole.
So in the launch of this Foodlands Trust, however, it's the donated lands that would be likely worked on first?
Yes.
With NGOs?
Yes. Yeah, the whole purpose of this was not to ask for capital to purchase land. It was deemed that there was enough sufficient local government-owned land that if there was to be a Foodlands Trust, it could get up and running based on what was currently owned.
Yes.
Rather than going through the added complexity of having to generate income to purchase a new piece of land to farm.
So were my numbers right there, that the annual operational costs for this Foodlands Trust would be about $130,000, I think I read at some point. And if, yeah,
So the numbers change a little bit depending on how many municipalities contribute
Right.
to the process. So
Okay.
if all the municipalities were to agree to come on board, which we know now is not going to happen, it's one amount, and then it would be greater than the other amount that's quoted in here that I'm just having a little bit of trouble finding. So I think
$1.75, I think.
so it was 190. Yeah. So that sounds about right.
Yeah.
So the more municipalities that come on board, theoretically, the less it costs.
Are you aware of why Colwood, Langford, Esquimalt, and Oak Bay opted out? They obviously didn't buy the idea of regional food security.
No, so there was no explanation from Colwood and Oak Bay. Langford was said that they would consider it after the CRD, or would consider additional services from the CRD after the tax increases had decreased again.
Okay.
So for them, it was a fiscal responsibility piece.
And if we were to opt in, does that put us in a queue, perhaps? Or if some land came available here that we were able to?
Sorry, through
Is
the
there a
chair, I don't think there is no lineup or queue or order. If a municipality demonstrates interest and a desire to be involved, then all those municipalities would be involved. It's not just the ones that can generate land and finances. They would all, like those that have finances involved would very obviously get some additional benefits, but there would still be those municipalities that were interested in the program would still have access to the program and the future of it, or they could opt out or opt in at a later date.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McMath?
So we don't have money or land to give you, and I don't really see the benefit of participating with the lands that you have right now so far away from us. But Tony touched on the CRD parkland down Sooke River Road. So you said that we should make comments where exactly?
There's an opportunity to provide feedback along with the, there's a form that's provided to go along with the CRD's request for input into this process, so you could add a note in there. That also, to your point, there's a number of farmers that are looking for lands. So farmers that could go through this program and come out of the Foodlands Trust may also decide to go across the CRD and look to farm in small places or lease other pieces of property throughout the regional district. So as you point out, there's no land in the district of Sooke, and there's probably not a
Well,
lot
there
in the
is,
budget.
it's just not ours. Yeah.
Fair enough.
And if you want participation, can you go back to them? Like as an idea for us, rather than us just fill out a comment section on the form?
Yes, very definitely. I could take it back. There's a little bit of there's a little bit more power and authority if it comes from the council.
Yeah, if we both do it.
Rather than me as staff, but I'd be happy to do both if, I'd be happy to relay that in the
Yeah, if you
comments
can
as
help advocate on our behalf, because we're in a little bit of a different situation
Right.
than some of the bigger municipalities. So to get us on board, that would be a winning ticket, I think.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor St-Pierre?
I'd just like to reemphasize something that seems to get missed, is just that when we're looking at the Foodlands Trust, it's about actually training new farmers and getting new farmers. So that's part of what's needed. We actually need small farms. So Sooke doesn't have large acreage. It has small acreage. It has small parcels, a lot of little parcels, 2 acre, 5 acre, 10 acre. These are not the types of farms that can actually be farmed necessarily with a lot of machinery, but we need people that are trained in farming can actually grow food. Our food security locally requires small farms. We need people that are trained. So one of the things that the Foodlands, I would never get that straight, Foodlands Trust? Anyway, one of the things this program would provide is an opportunity for farmers to get training at a reasonable cost. Right now, at $100,000 an acre, people just don't have the money to farm. As it happens, a family farm used to be around 1 to 2 acres, but even then, you can't access it because you can't put a home on it, which means you actually have to rent or somehow find some other means. This is actually a tool whereby land can be leased at a reasonable cost at agricultural rates so that new farmers can actually get a chance to learn how to do the business and grow farm. That's what food security is going to be about. I think the first number that was thrown out when we expected maybe a larger participation was $10,000. $10,000 is a pittance. I mean, we spent $50K on a walkway to the ocean. That's, I mean, really, $10,000 for food security versus that. We may not have the money in this year's budget, but we have to seriously consider whether or not we want to eat in the future when the island only produces 10% of our food. So let's put this in perspective. Thank you.
Okay, so just to roll this forward, we have received, so would it make sense, there's two ways to do this, because if there's a resolution passed now, our public input follows in a little bit, right? So then we're not hearing from the public and we've made a resolution. The other option is just that we bring this to the next regular council meeting. We have one more on July 22nd, and then we can pull all the pieces together, have the form there, and then we can decide what our participation level would be. So it's either tonight or we can just defer, make that in 2 weeks. Councillor Logans?
Could we table the motion till after public hearing or public discussion?
Yeah, or that's actually, yes, thank you, that would be an option too.
Through your worship, that's what I was going to suggest, and I can just let you know the agenda for the 22nd is already very packed, so I would not encourage you to defer anything from tonight's meeting if at all possible.
Okay, because we have received a lot on this, and we know that there's the three options. So then, in terms though of where council sits, we know that we don't have the land. There were three different pieces to note: to participate with funds, and to participate with land. And then there's basically a form, and you check off, and then you provide other feedback there as well. So part of our discussion here tonight then is whether or not we participate at all, and if we do we participate and support it with the financial contribution or not? Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, I'm all in favor of tabling it. I would prefer to another meeting, but I understand that packed agenda and it makes sense to deal with it tonight. Originally, I had the figure of $10,000 from the District of Sooke, but that's without these other people not being a part of this process now. I think it was Colwood, Langford, Oak Bay, Esquimalt? Yeah. So what would be the cost? What would you be looking to from Sooke, dollar-wise?
I'm not sure. I haven't done the revised budgeting based on those that would be interested right now. There's still a couple that haven't made decisions. I think Central Saanich is trying to make their decision tonight.
So with that, I mean, I'm not sure what I have to, if we do it to a vote tonight, I don't have anything to vote on when I don't know a dollar amount, so that's not going to work for me.
Well, in that, Councillor
Well,
Logan?
I would guess it's going to be less than $1.75, that's guaranteed. I noticed that Victoria has signed on, and this is a per capita situation, is it? So I suspect we're looking at $1 to $1.25 per person, per taxpayer in Sooke, per year to support this program, which champions regional food security, and as Ms. Dunbar told us back at the Committee of the Whole, you just never know what'll happen, and perhaps a benefactor, what were some of these options that Ms. Geggy told us about? Bequeathed private donations, foundations. So this puts us in a position, given climate change and all else, but I'm not to argue at this point, am I?
Well, I'd like, we have other items on the agenda.
Yeah.
I think just part of it is, you know, are we able to express that we are comfortable with, say, $10,000 because that was the initial piece, rather than committing to an unknown figure if council wanted something known?
Is it not a tax as opposed to an outright payment by the district?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, through the chair, there's a cost estimate that was associated with the program as a whole, and then we attempted to break that down as an estimate for what that would be per capita, per household. And so I believe through a sub-regional service at the CRD, that's how it could be charged back.
Councillor Logans?
Thank you. Thanks for presenting tonight and coming forward with the information. To council, one thing we could do is financially support it in principle and then request a report back from the CRD. And when we receive that information and what the amount is, we can certainly discuss it again at that time. But at least at this point, then it lets the CRD know that we are willing to put some money into the game as well. I think that's what most of us are interested in terms of participating. And then I also had a question to you, Mr. Weightman. Do you know if the local NGOs that were listed in the report were the Farmlands Trust Society in Greater Victoria and the Sooke Region Farmland Trust Society and another? Do you know if the Sooke Region Farmland Trust Society has been approached or part of the discussion at this point, or? I'm sure they will be at some point, but I don't know if they have been.
Through the chair, I believe they were contacted. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do a lot of the consultation myself, and so that fell to the consultant. But I'm pretty sure they were listed in the technical report as if they weren't directly contacted, Sooke Food Chi was, and so I don't know what the relationship there is.
Okay,
thanks.
just question for our corporate officer. Can we just table this item to like after 12.1, make it 12.2, and then council can reflect on this through the meeting? We can hear some views from the public, and then we can deliberate which way we want to go at the end of the meeting?
Yes, you may.
Okay, so do you require a motion for that?
Yes, we would just
Okay, so
table discussion on this item until after 12.1.
Okay, so motion to table, but I'd like to move it to the end of the meeting, like to following 12.2. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor St-Pierre. So everyone's okay with that? So we'll just review it at the end of the meeting. It's
Yeah, I just
12.2.
have one clarification as we got the calculator out. That 1.75, is that for like 13,500 residents or per household that is taxed? I'm sorry, through the chair to Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, I guess what I have here in my notes, which I took, I believe, from the report, that the cost to 5 municipalities would be $1.75 per taxpayer.
I think it's per tax folio,
Per tax folio.
right?
Okay.
I don't know that.
And that's
I don't know
if
that's
Central
true.
Saanich, North Saanich, Saanich, Sydney, and Sooke were participants. Now, however, Victoria View Royal have signed on as well. And Machosen is backing the program. So,
Okay, we don't know what it is. It's too difficult, I think, for us to estimate that. So, okay, so we'll discuss it at the end. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr.
Sorry, would
Weightman.
you like me to stick around for questions or what?
No, because this is our only opportunity to raise those, so you're fine. We thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move into our next delegation, and I'd like to welcome Ms. Margarita Dominguez from SAFARS. And we have 5 minutes on the timer for you as well, Ms. Dominguez.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's good.
Well, actually, oh yeah, sorry, you're good.
That's okay, yes. I have come alone today because after 7 years, a lot of people have come over, and people just are kind of deceived that nothing has been provided, any support for anything that we have requested. But I'm not complaining, I'm just have new ideas because our city is growing and more problems with the animals are arising. And what happens is, like we say, we presented a 2,200 signature, 50 letters of support. We asked for a referendum. We asked for an affordable pet-friendly houses. We asked for a dog park. And as you can see, in all the files that we presented from the CRD or from the district, we have been like a monkey in the middle. The media send us to the CRD send us to the SPCA. The SPCA, everybody says that no, there is no jurisdiction, there is nothing they can do. And when we ask you, you say to send the animals to the shelter, to the CRD, which is an animal kill shelter, which in the end, we are based to continue doing what we do. Now we work with foster homes after the CRD came to my house and removed the animals, which means we are working in a different way, but we continue people calling us for animals that are abandoned because the pet housing is not affordable. Have pet-friendly apartments like the ones that you accept taxes to, that is the McCullough building and the Knox, they are no pet-friendly, which means we know families that they have pets, and they have children, and the family had to depart, and they had to live it with friends, and it's sad for the families, which means we think that as Sooke grows, some bylaw changes need to be done. Perhaps some bylaw officers need to, because as media was telling, he is overwhelmed by complaints, which means Saanich, for example, has his own bylaw officers, animal bylaw officers. As we presented on the papers, animal bylaw officers, the course is an online course, it's not too expensive. The building bylaw officers, regular, is also a course in the BC Institute of Justice, which is online too, and it's not too expensive. Which means those are things that I think that as soon as we grow, we need to be considering to offer to the people, because the people that call me they are desperate. They don't know, they don't want to leave the animal on the streets. And this is what is happening. People are leaving the animals, but they don't want the animals to be killed. And they have the hope that somebody will rescue, which means it's a sad situation to offer to your constituents, I believe. And then what happens is a temporary solution that we ask until a shelter. What do we think that a shelter benefits? That one day you say that the shelter is just an expense, you know? Shelter, we can get grants, a lot of grants when we have a shelter. From, I don't remember in this moment, there are grants for veterinary care, there are grants for building, there are grants, not municipal grants, there are grants from the states, there are grants from everywhere if you decide to embark in that. There are a lot of public donations. There are a lot of the adoptions. In this moment, all the adoptions, the animals that the CRD adopts, the CRD keeps the money. We are paying $100,000 almost to them, and all that money, they keep it. Which means, and the grants are covering for the veterinary expenses. Which means the CRD is a win-win, but the district has nothing, which means you're just paying. And the other thing is, like you will know, Mayor, when people go to the park and see a backyard breeder with cute dogs, that is fomenting puppy mills. And it's fomenting people like the guy that was in the park selling puppies. I know those dogs are infected with fleas. Those dogs, they don't eat. The same guy sold a dog to a handicapped man, and he took money from that handicapped man, Ben, the gentleman that just died not long ago. That man had to pay month by month. Our society was providing the food to that man, and he has given the food to the breeder, which means all those things are going to be stopped by having a shelter. And then the other thing is that we have a lot of volunteers. And then the other thing is that in the meantime, until we don't have a shelter, I suggest to create a committee to deal with animal issues. For example, the other day, last week, we had 3 calls of animals abandoned. We pay for the entire spay, neuter, veterinary care, everything. And then what media sent me, call the CRD, they're going to pick them up. Okay, well, now the question is...
We're out of time, and I'd just like to ask that you don't
Yeah.
keep making negative comments about our
It's not
staff
negative,
member. It
that
was
is
a
the
very
truth.
large
It's not negative,
job
it's the
to
truth.
do.
I presented all the facts, all
Okay,
the
Ms.
backup
Dominguez,
sources.
do you want to wrap up your presentation, please?
Yes.
And then I'll see if council has questions.
Please, if you can create a committee to deal with animal issues like that, when an animal, because you want to license cats, but if nothing gets done before, this is the same thing, which means a committee can deal with that and discuss to council what to do with certain people that they have cats at large. The license is not going to solve the problem, as it's not solving it now. What it needs is such another group apart. For example, Councillor, is the one that presented us for a shelter not long ago. He can be part of a committee and deal with the interior things that our city is having in this moment. Thank you very much for having us. And the last thing is we need more.
We are out of time.
Yeah.
But I will share that there's been no motion ever made about cat licensing in my memory.
Oh, but they are always trying.
Okay. Not aware of that. Questions from members of council? Thank you for your presentation.
The last thing is we need more
we are-
veterinarians,
okay.
please.
Okay.
Because there are no veterinarians in town, it's only one available. The other veterinarians, they are not receiving new patients, new clients.
Okay, thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you very
Dominguez.
much.
We are in the process of finalizing our priorities and working with I've sort of been waiting for our new CAO to join us so we can take this all into consideration. Questions from members of council? Councillor Bateman?
Thank you very much for this presentation, which does sum up a wide range of issues. It seems like you're seeking an animal shelter in Sooke, take back animal control services from the CRD and run our own. We currently are paying $82,000 a year to the CRD. We're in I think the first or second year of a 5-year contract, so this is going to be down the road if anything changes. You're looking for an off-leash dog park, pet-friendly development and rentals. As a longtime cat owner, I know that it's an inhumane and unfair system out there. And, you know, it's private property rights, and that's a tough one. You want more humane policy towards feral cats, and we need more vets. So these are all good subjects. I like your idea of an animal issues committee of some kind, because we have been talking about these issues, particularly the off-leash dog park. And I do take offense with a few things you say, Ms. Dominguez, particularly around these kill shelters. You call them animal kill shelters. Victoria Humane Society, the BCSPCA, I think, well, I'll quote what the Victoria Humane Society says. The term no-kill is a misleading term. Most no-kill shelters select the types of animals they take in, bypassing those that are ill or of poor temperament or health. You look at the stats from the BCSPCA, and they are, in fact, able to, of the 22,000 animals, less than, what is that? 1,348 were euthanized. So the system itself is actually pretty effective at the moment, though I'm...
May I answer that?
No, the councillor is speaking.
No, I was making more of a statement than a
Okay.
question. So just to sum up, thank you for the presentation and bringing this back in a focused manner and giving this council something to chew over.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Beddoes?
Just a quick question. You talked about feeding a dog and things like that. Where do you get your funding from now?
We don't ask for any grants or we don't apply for any grants or the public donates to us.
So it's just at a dollar
We
donation?
reject charity status, we reject everything, we are by our own.
Okay.
Over the years, we decided to do it that way. It's
Okay.
much simple, it was taking all our time, all the paperwork and it was taking all our time for the rescue and for the pet food bank.
So in the future, if we had a cat rescue, how would that be funded then? Is
If
it
you
through
have,
us?
I will volunteer. I do not want to do this for all my life. I just want to retire from this. But until something is getting done, the animals, they have only us. The cats, they only have us. Which
Thank you.
means I have to continue until something is done. That's why I'm here. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your service and your attendance tonight, Ms. Dominguez. Okay, so moving into item 7 is now the report of the Chief Administrative Officer. So over to Mr. McInnes, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. It will be a short report, but I do just want to express that I feel extremely blessed to be given the opportunity to serve this council and the people of Sooke. And I thank you for the appointment to this very important position. It was a full week last week, my first week here. I look forward to spending some time with council next week, talking about priorities, sharing those with staff, and I'm sure that I will have more to report at the next council meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. McInnes. Okay, moving into item 8, and this is our public question and comment period. So this is for all items on tonight's agenda, and there is a 2-minute time allocated per speaker, and we just require your first and last name and the agenda item that you're speaking on. And there's also a sheet up front, if you wouldn't mind just writing in your first and last name, so that way we can ensure that your name is spelt correctly in our minutes. Thank you.
Ellen Lures. I'd like to talk on the Foodland Trust issue. As a farmer for 32 years here, I don't see the point of having farmland trust, farmland put out for farmers. What we need to do is to assist the farmers that are already here and make sure that there's rules and regulations that help them to prosper. There's some changes been made to the Slaughter Act, which are good. It'll help the farmers to be able to sell some of their own slaughtered animals. But the cost of water is exorbitant, CRD water. CRD water for us is $1,200. We have, in the Farmland Trust, who pays for the Farmland Trust? The taxes. Existing farmers be in conflict. As a farmer, I feel that someone else is getting special compensation where I have to pay the water, I have to pay the taxes, and there isn't it's not a level playing field. On where there's no land without houses, they don't have to pay the high water rates, was something which we still haven't looked at. I've asked for all the years that for 20 years, that council would look at that, because farmers have to pay the residential rate before they go on a farm rate. Well, if you don't have a house, you don't have to pay the residential rate. So the residential rate is $980. It equates to about that. And then you go on to, in the wintertime, when it's pouring rain, you don't have to water, so you pay $2. Big deal. So, so it's not conducive to farmers. Who pays for the lots, the equipment, the fencing, the labor, the fuel costs? Those costs are all really high for farmers, and there isn't any compensation for farmers. Right now with farmers, you can have farm fuel if you have a vehicle that is a truck. It can't carry passengers, blah, blah, blah. It's ridiculous. And it isn't very much difference anyway. 2 cents a liter. It doesn't make a heck of a lot of difference. I know the 2 minutes are up, but you're asking here for $10,000 to go towards a farmland trust when the regulations will not help. The lack of the regulations the way they are do not support farming. They don't support farmers. So you put somebody on the farm and you say, oh, well, go ahead and farm. Well, they're not going to make enough money, so they have to have a day job. I know, wrap it up, but it's a serious issue. It's a serious issue, and to give money for farmland trusts when the issues haven't been dealt with, and Fuchi initially, when it was started, was supposed to be to support farmers and to help to change the regulations to support farms and farmers. So a farmland trust, unless it's supported by proper regulations, isn't going to prosper. It's just going to cost us. Thank you.
Whoops. Sorry. Thank you, Ms. Lures. That was my mistake on the buttons. Sorry about that. Other speakers tonight? Sorry, could you please turn on the microphone? I just turned it off. It's on the button on the base of the stem. There we are.
Okay.
Thank you.
My name's Maria Golly, and I'm here for my son, Patrick Gollygale. He teaches at the local high school, and he's very involved with the food movement. He teaches food at the high school. First, I just want to say that some of the things that have always impressed me about Sooke are its sense of community, its honoring of the people on whose land we stand, its acknowledgement of the past and its values while looking forward to the future. I'm from Colwood, and we don't have that. That's my personal comment. But I see part of this council's work is to do due diligence in maintaining this balance. I coordinated the trained workers for the emergency social services in Vancouver for 5 years. And one of the things that was the bane of our existence was food security. And at that time, we had 3 to 5 days of worth of supplies on the island if we couldn't get from off-island. And I dare say with all of the development that's going on, we're now down to 3. So I think that developers need to incorporate food sustainability into its infrastructure and its language. That local food will lower traffic, lower air pollution, and it's integral to a healthy community. So farmland is one of your most priceless assets in your community. Our food, if we can't get food from offshore, is going to be in the crops we have in the ground and the cattle that we have in the barns. So I hope that you're forward enough thinking to take this into consideration when you're determining what your future is going to look like. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Other speakers tonight? Okay. Ms. Lewis for a second time?
Thank you, then I can finish the first part.
Still have to reintroduce yourself.
Ellen Lures. I just wanted to say, because of regulations, which just happened in the last couple of days, we've had a bear come in, take our chickens during the day, outside, free-ranging chickens, and killed 7 of our chickens over 2 days. I called the conservation officer, he says, "Are you electrified?" No. Well, you have to have electric fence or we can't come and destroy the bear. Well, says I'd have to get in a machine to take down all the shrubs and blackberries and everything to put up an electric fence. Well, then you have to lock up your chickens and lock up your goats. So it's not cruel to lock up the goats and the chickens, but I sell free-range eggs. How can I'm not selling battery chickens. So there's a regulation that says, does the Farm Act, the Right to Farm Act supersede the Wildlife Act? He didn't know. Well, it does. But there's not a support for the farmers. I mean, that's $35 a chicken, point of lay. That's a lot of money to lose. So I'm just saying we need to have the support for the farmers that are there. And we have, and one way that the community can do things properly, like this lady just suggested, which we suggested in our agricultural plan too, is that when there's developments, there has to be community gardens put in. There has to be an opportunity to grow food in every possible way. And when there's good land, for goodness sake, don't split it up into 300 square meter lots where you can't even grow a potato. You know, really, I see some really nice land that's just being pushed aside, all the beautiful soil taken off. And so we have to be cognizant of those issues. If we want to make land available, that's the way we have to keep it available. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Lures. Any other speakers tonight? Okay, if you could please come forward.
Thank you. Mary Alice Johnson, local farmer. It seems to me that when we talk about Sooke and Saanich, we're not really thinking regional, and that food crosses borders, and we're all one community. And it seems like having more food being produced anywhere in the community is quite wonderful, more local food. So it's interesting that some of the communities that aren't buying on are the ones that don't have they're the ones that really need the food. And the ones that are buying on are the ones that have the food. Maybe they appreciate it more. And I want to sort of repeat this need for land. I bought my farm in 30 years ago, 10 acres for $60,000. I could have bought another piece of land about 15 years ago, another 10 acres right beside me for $150,000. I did buy another piece of land beside me, 5 acres, paid $260,000, and that was like 10 years ago. If I wanted to touch a piece of land like that today, I'd have to pay so much money. It probably would be easily $600,000 if it had a building on it. And so land is so expensive now. It's not in relationship. I think we understand, many of us are talking about how speculation on land has put it totally out of reach. So it's important that the community step in, I believe, to help acquire that land so that we can have farming happen on it, because a private person can't. I could, when I was 40 years old, I'd saved enough money in my pension to buy my farm. But a young person couldn't, even a 50, you'd have to be 80 years old to do it, and then you wouldn't be able to farm. So if we want young, able bodies out there producing food for us, good food, we've got to support them with finding land and making it available to them. And we will have land show up in Sooke that we'll want to get as a community farm. It will happen. But right now, there are lands in very close neighboring part of our region, Saanich part of our region, Machosen's part of our region, all of these places. It's not that far to get there, and their food can come over here for us too. So I think we should think larger region and support this. I hope you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Okay, so we'll move on into tonight's agenda portion here. So I'm going to move on into reports to item 9.1, please. And that is called Memorial Plaque Contribution Policy. So welcome, Ms. Hooper.
Thank you, Your Worship. In front of you today is the updated Memorial Plaque Contribution Policy with the amendments that have been recommended by Council. I'll put forward to you the recommendation that you adopt the Memorial Plaque Contribution Policy as written.
Okay, so thank you very much for your work on this, Ms. Hooper. Councillor St-Pierre? Okay, so Councillor St-Pierre, we have discussed this at a committee of the whole and a few meetings through the Sooke Program of the Arts Committee. So we've had quite some discussion on it. So there's a motion that Council adopt the Memorial Plaque Contribution Policy CO-002 by Councillor St-Pierre, seconded by Councillor Logans. Any discussion on the motion or any further clarification needed on the policy itself? Councillor Weightman?
Yeah, thank you for the policy here. Now, I'm curious about this $400 to install a memorial plaque. Seems like a high figure to me. Could you explain that?
Through Your Worship, yes. The plaques themselves are $200 to supply, but what that other amount of money is accounted for is in the amount of time to administer the policy, receive the application, also usually do a site visit with that bereaved family and decide on the exact location of the memorial plaque, and then to go with staff to install that. You have to pick it up, you have to, from the casting agent, and then deliver it and install it. So nothing's cheap. Just stopping the truck costs a little bit of money. So that's just a high-level estimate. We could refine it if you so chose us to do that. But that's basically what we think the money goes towards.
Yeah, a constituent asked me to ask that. So excellent answer. Thank you. So in the old policy, we had this clause, should donors desire, they may donate and pay for in advance up to 3 consecutive terms, each term being 10 years for a possible total term of 30 years. Now, that didn't make it through to the final policy, and I think we discussed that at one point.
So through your worship, the original policy that you're referring to was rescinded by council. Yes. And then in the conversations that we've had in this room, both in committee of the whole and by council, it was suggested either a 10 or a 20-year term. So we could, at your direction, extend that in the fees bylaw to allow for also a 30-year term with an appropriate fee attached to that, should that be council's wishes. But as it stands, we only have the allotment for a 10-year or a 20-year term.
There was a 20-year.
Agreed. Yes, there is. Under fees, on the second page of the report, item number 2 says the 20-year.
Okay, and for me, that's a good.
If I might just add, part of it too is just the wear and tear on the commemorative items, and just how in some seasons the whiff and spit in particular is impacted differently, and that may shorten the lifespan. So I think that was part of the discussion.
Your worship, just to remind council that the donation is not for the commemorative item. The District of Sooke is
right.
Owning that. It's rather for the right to place your memorial plaque on that commemorative item. I will also note that the thought was to only have a 20-year term was so that we could free up those benches for other people who would
Yes.
like to memorialize their loved ones.
Yeah, but in this case, the plaque would be transferred onto the sculpture, and then it would go over there automatically.
That's the
yeah.
correct.
Okay. Other questions from members of council? I just want to acknowledge and thank Ms. Hooper for all your work on this file. I didn't quite realize just the intent of the work that you did, meeting with different families and going to do all the site visits, and it's a time where you're hearing their stories and all of that, and then coming up with something that works for them. So thank you very much for all of your work.
Thank you, and I'd also like to acknowledge that corporate services and our reception staff do deal with with those families on a regular basis too. So it's one of the more rewarding parts of our job when we get to actually work through and talk to families about these difficult times.
Okay, thank you all for all of that. So I'll call the question then on adoption. All those in favor? Opposed? Is carried unanimously. Thank you so much for your work. Okay, item 9.2, rescindment of employee moving expense policy 7.9. So will that go to our corporate officer?
Thank you, Your Worship. As it's pointed out in the report there, when council adopted the recent policy framework, we adopted both council and administrative policies, and this one needed a revamp, so we've done that, and as a result, it has ended up as an administrative policies, which is now approved by our Chief Administrative Officer. So just as housekeeping, we're asking that council rescind policy 7.9.
Okay, Councillor McMath is moving that council rescind policy 7.9, moving expenses, and I think Councillor St-Pierre, okay, so you're here to second. Councillor Beddoes is seconding that. Any question on the motion? Seeing none then, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously, thank you. Moving on to bylaws. Item 10, please. Welcome, Mr. Howitt. Sooke Sewer Specified Area Proposed Boundary Adjustment for 7150 Grant Road West.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you stated, we're here to discuss the inclusion into the sewer service area for 7150 Grant Road West, I should say. 7150, as you can see on the drawing there, is just north of the shaded area on the south side, which is all in the existing sewer service area. The existing sewer line goes on the north side of Grant Road, parallel to all the lots on the north side, and they're all currently serviced. They were put in many years ago, and I'll get into that in the report. The owners of 7150 Grant Road West have submitted a petition for local service in order to add their property into the sewer specified area and allow for connection to the municipal wastewater system due to insufficient on-site disposal. The applicants originally petitioned the district for inclusion into the SSA in May of 2008. Once infrastructure was installed along Grant Road in 2011, neighboring property owners were sent letters advising of the possibility to connect to the system should council include their properties into the SSA. At that point in time, the applicant's property was included in a report to council to amend Bylaw 147 to include 5 Grant Road properties into the SSA. However, staff subsequently prepared an updated report as the new business prior to the council meeting, removing the property at 7150 Grant Road West and one other property at the owner's request. In the case of the owners of 7150 Grant Road West, they declined to connect at that time. Access to the municipal wastewater collection and treatment system for Grant Road West properties located between Furwood Place and West Coast Road was made possible with the installation of developer-required sewer infrastructure in 2011. When the new infrastructure was installed, allowances were made for the existing properties along Grant Road fronting on the new main to make connection to the system. It was decided at that time to allow individual properties to apply for inclusion rather than imposing a mandatory connection process. And keeping in mind that was back in 2011. The applicants have requested inclusion into the SSA after septic inspection for the pending house sale failed to locate the presence of a fully functioning on-site septic system as per the attached letter and report. The property at 7150 Grant Road West is located within the community growth area as identified with the Sooke official community plan, and its long-term goal is to provide sanitary service to all properties within the community growth area. Policy 11.5 Sooke Core Area Local Services Area Boundary Policy permits council to consider application from the individual property owners for inclusion into the SSA. And I'd be happy to answer any questions beyond that.
Okay, thank you very much for the report, Mr. Howitt. It seems fairly straightforward. However, questions from members of council? Councillor Bateman?
I hate to be the only one
that's
chatting away
okay.
here today, but so 30 plus years of a dysfunctional sewer system, of a septic field, how does that happen? And do you think that are there a lot of dysfunctional septic fields in our community? And where's that?
Through your worship, this one in particular is not necessarily a dysfunctioning septic field. According to the owner who was here tonight, when they had it inspected, the field does not exist. And why over 30 years we haven't seen, or the neighbors haven't seen any kind of indication, i.e. raw sewage floating in ditches or going through their properties, is beyond me. It must be finding a fracture within the rock outcroppings within the area and disappearing. Other than that, I have absolutely no explanation for it.
Right next to the sewer system, right, to the main sewer, so, okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have a Councillor St-Pierre? Okay, so we'll do this in separate pieces here. So the first part would be that council received the petition for local area service for the property located at 7150 Grant Road West, legally described as Lot 21, Section 20, Sooke District Plan 36642. Moved by Councillor St-Pierre and seconded by Councillor Logans. Yes, I did. I saw Councillor Logans through the fern. Aw. Okay, so anything further, I guess, is there? This is kind of an out there type of question, Mr. Howitt, but is there anywhere that you know, given that there is no field, like, we don't have any way of monitoring anything, like, at some point, this is going to end up in the ocean, and then one of the discharge points, but it would be diluted by that point, but stormwater and the like, groundwater and all of that.
Your worship, I wish I could answer the question, but I don't know where it's going.
Okay.
I would suspect that it's finding a fracture in the ground and going through the gravels, et cetera. It would be long dissipated before it ever met, or ever ran into the ocean.
Okay, I wonder sometimes if there's others out there, and that's just, it would be so difficult to even to know that, and one by one? Okay. All right. I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. And the second part is, and that council introduce and give first, second, and third reading to bylaw number 739, Sooke Sewer Specified Amendment, bylaw 147-38. Moved by Councillor St-Pierre and seconded by Councillor McMath. Any further discussion on that? I guess adoption would come at our 22nd meeting. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That too is carried unanimously. Okay. Thank you for the report. Another Sooke mystery to solve. Okay. Could. I don't know. Council Remuneration and Benefits Bylaw 740-2019. Ms. Mushada.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, this is more of a housekeeping item. As you'll recall, Council had a discussion back in February of this year and discussed council remuneration. As we have a council remuneration bylaw, it really should be incorporated through the bylaw and not just stand on a resolution, although it's still effective. So in doing so, we actually gave a review of the bylaw and actually decided that a new bylaw should be presented. So the old one is being rescinded, 379, which is attached to the report, and recommend council give first, second, and third to the new bylaw 740.
Okay, moved by Councillor McMath and seconded by Councillor St-Pierre that council give first, second, and third reading to Council Remuneration and Benefits Bylaw number 740-2019. Any discussion on this? See none, all those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. It's just the lights in this building are always quite interesting. Okay, we have a notice of motion from Councillor St-Pierre. So this is here for notice, and then it'll be debated at the next meeting, right? Okay. And that is that council participate in a co-application submitted by the CRD on behalf of its members to UBCM's Community Resilience Investment Program for the 2020 intake for the development of a regional vegetation management strategy.
I'm sorry, Your Worship, this is actually for a debate tonight. This was presented at the last meeting.
Right,
Notice given.
as it says right at the top. Okay, thank you. So that has been moved by Councillor St-Pierre, so look for a seconder then. Seconded by Councillor Bateman. So speaking to it, Councillor St-Pierre?
I found out by discussing this with Gord Baird, Councillor in the Highlands, that there's a certain amount of money available from the province. I believe it's, I think it's $1.4 million. We don't actually have to pay for any of this. This is simply a matter of us putting a letter forward to the CRD. The staff will take care of the proposal, and we can put together basically it's to manage the trees that are dying and replace them. So we're looking at a strategy for actually managing our forests as certain species, like the cedars, essentially die off. So it's a management strategy for our woodlands, and it doesn't cost us anything and will help us greatly.
Okay, so this would be the CRD will put forward the whole application, and it would be, in some ways, it would be a regional initiative. Any questions on this item? Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, I was curious to know what Chief Mount thought of this particular motion, because I know he's very much on this UBCM Community Resiliency Investment Program. He's been taking $25,000 chunks for ensuring that the Phillips Road Sun River area, which is one of areas of extreme risk for wildfire, has some proper emergency routes planned out. So that would be my only hesitation. I'd like to know, because we're a community that, given our size, I think we can get a maximum of $25,000, as opposed to a community in a true wildfire area where you can get as much as 150. So that would be my one hesitation, just to know what the chief thought of this.
Okay, so I did just look up the motion from Councillor Baird, and it does take into things like Fire Smart BC, and just because they're looking at some of the dry is fuel basically for wildfire and actually spreads that risk, and so that's part of this overall strategy that was here within this report. Would you like to add to that, Councillor St-Pierre?
When I was first looking at this, I did actually share the correspondence with Chief Mount, and I don't recall him actually having any issues with this. I think I would have remembered if he did. The reason that this was brought up in this particular way is that it requires council to actually make a request to put this through, so that's not actually a staff thing to happen. We have to do this. So that's why it comes to us in this particular way. I was wondering why it was why it wasn't moving forward. It's because this one little piece was missing. So.
To our CAO.
If I could, Your Worship, one of the tenets of Fire Smart is that it really is a community-based program. And each of the neighborhoods that wants to participate in Fire Smart is supposed to have a champion that brings together the community, and the community actually goes out and does the Fire Smart work. So the vegetation piece, the vegetation management, fuel management piece, really for Fire Smart to work, there has to be a community group in a neighborhood like Sun River that comes together and wants to take on this work.
Ms. Hooper, I see you've shifted to a microphone, so perhaps, do you have some comments?
Yes, Your Worship. To further what our CAO has said, the District of Sooke and the Sooke Fire Department, through Deputy Chief Barney, is actively participating in the Fire Smart program, of which this UBCM resolution or this application would be an application to Fire Smart. So we are working in the Parks Department with the Sooke Fire Rescue Service to help individuals become more fire resilient and start implementing that Fire Smart program. So we're all starting to work together to start implementing that Fire Smart piece of the puzzle.
Thank you.
So in short, $25,000 would help to bring our first community on board.
Got it. Okay. Any other clarification needed from members of council? Okay. All right. I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much for bringing this forward, Councillor St-Pierre and Ms. Hooper, for your leadership on this. Okay, so then that brings us to correspondence, one that was pulled, and this is for minister meeting requests. So we introduced this briefly, and Councillor St-Pierre has reached out to me to discuss a meeting with our Minister of Agriculture, Alana Popham. And so some of the conversations that I've had with some of the ministers is that we do, because we're in driving distance, have the opportunity to meet outside of UBCM so that it frees up UBCM opportunities for those that are traveling greater distances. But sometimes it depends on the minister's availability. So in this case, it would make sense that we would submit a request to meet with Minister Popham, and then we can just note in there, does she have a preference to meet with us at UBCM or outside of UBCM? But in either case, we still need to provide a briefing document in advance to do that. So at this point, I've just heard from one councillor so far about setting up that meeting, and then at next week's committee of the whole, we can actually just go over some of the bullet points that we actually want to put into the briefing document together so that we're all familiar at it. The meeting times will, if it's granted to be at UBCM, there's just a lot of things happening at the same time, because we would have the resolution session that would happen and the meeting could happen at the exact same time. I will have some duties at UBCM and may need to chair different sessions, so I could not attend the minister meeting. So in this case, all of us need to be aware, and we'll just sort of formulate a plan of who can do what. So some of us are in the room and some of us are at the meeting, and then we can sort of debrief afterwards and share how that went. Other meetings we've had in the past are Minister of Health, of course, and Minister of Transportation, but we have such a working relationship with both of those at both of those ministries right now with the works that are happening in the communities. So I don't think it makes sense to make the meeting. It's kind of we're meeting to meet, right? And that doesn't really make sense until we actually have a preferred advocacy piece. So there's still time, so still leave that open just to see what we would need to do, and then of course there's opportunities throughout the years needed. So at this time we'll go with this one, and then we can discuss some more detail and we can refine that. Councillor St-Pierre and I will share that with Council of the Committee of the Whole. So at this point, Council direct staff to seek the following UBCM minister meetings with the Minister of Agriculture, Lana Popham. I may have a mover by Councillor Logans, seconded by Councillor St-Pierre. Any discussion from members of Council? Does that all make sense for now? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Okay, so this now will bring us back to the item that we tabled, and that would be for the CRD Foodlands Trust. We've heard from some members of the public, both with a farming background. And at this point, they're on the form. There was the 3 different pieces. So I'll turn to Councillor Logans, please.
Yeah, I would like to suggest that because I agree with Councillor Beddoes that we can't, it's not really in our best interest to say we're just going to put forward a sum of money. Even if we said $10,000, we're not sure if that's what's needed or if we could do more or less, and it's something that we can discuss later. But I still think we need to let the CRD know that we are potentially willing to assist with financial aid, and just say that in principle we do until such time that we receive information about who's involved, and then they can give us a breakdown of what that financial commitment might look like. And of course, then we can decide whether we want it to be that much more or less when the time comes. I just wanted to touch on a couple of comments by the public, and I got a sense that there was a bit of competition between us and them, between local farmers and the Foodlands Trust. But this really is to train a whole new generation of farmers, and it will be a great complement to our community, even though the land that's been identified is currently outside of Sooke proper. And it is also very true, as the comments were noted, that we do need to make an additional effort to create accessible farmland in our community. So I think that we can do both things. We can definitely do that, and have those farmers growing in another community while we make it with the farmland more accessible within our community. Because there's no doubt that if we make Sooke a more attractable place for farmers, they'll come here. And we do have the tools to do that. And I did want to note as well, the one speaker that discussed incorporating farmland or co-op farmland on developments. That's an excellent idea, and perhaps that's something that we can look at in lieu of 5% parks when that's not an option. But we'll have to look into our, all our paperwork. But that was, thank you. It was an excellent idea, so something we can adjust.
Thank you, Councillor Logans. Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, I don't think we have enough to go on so far. I mean, what I heard tonight was actually even more confusing than I heard the other night. I have some real big problems with it. I look at our own community, and we have the Baptist church down here that in the first year of operation in their garden, they did 1,000 pounds of food to the food bank. The second year, they did 2,000 pounds, and this year they're on track to do 3,000 pounds of food. We have the Phillips Road Garden, the community garden down there, which is just a tremendous place. If we were going to spend $10,000 a year, and I'm just guessing at that because I can't have a round figure on that, 10 or more, it doesn't matter. When you do that over 10 years and we've got no land to offer, there's $100,000 that I'd like to see spent in Sooke for Sooke people. And I agree with a couple of our people speaking in that we can't ignore our present farmers, and we can't ignore, I think we can do much, much more with $10,000 than giving it, and they basically said it was for staff members, I believe, 2 staff members, to hobble this thing together. I'm all for keeping farmland, and I'm all for doing that, but I think we need to look at our own backyard first. And there's a lot of things that we can do here. Maybe use that $100,000 to put another garden in another part of Sooke, and again have 3,000 pounds of vegetables available either for sale or to the food bank. And these are people that very much need it. So I really am not for this. I understand the reason for banking farmland, but A, we don't have any to give them. And B is, I don't think it's wisely spent of our taxpayers' money to ship it downtown for 2 staff members of the CRD, when there's a lot of things that we could be doing here in our local community to support our local food. And there's lots of ways to go about it. So that's my 2 bits worth.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Beddoes. Councillor St-Pierre?
I have a few responses to comments made by the public and others as well. One of them is in terms of the regulations. That's absolutely the case. The regulations do not actually favor small farms, and they need to be addressed. That's one of the things that we're hoping to do with Minister Popham. So we are aware and trying to do stuff in that direction. The residential water rates versus farm rates are actually being considered at this point in a 4-year process by the CRD. I've actually followed up on that, and I'm hoping to see some action sometime soon. I believe the report may actually be coming out of the next meeting of the CRD Water Commission. So we'll see how that goes. There was a mention of, a level playing field between old farmers and new farmers. I absolutely agree. We desperately need a level playing field, but as was pointed out, part of that level playing field is actually access to land, which no longer exists for younger farmers. Those young farmers would have to take on a $500,000 mortgage to sell carrots. That's just nuts. It just can't happen. It cannot be. So we do need a level playing field, but because the real estate market has dragged the price of farmland up, despite the fact that it should, when it's ALR land, not be attached to the real estate market, we're in a situation where it's inaccessible. Something has to be solved, because right now, most of our farmland, small plots in Sooke, are actually taking on horses and hobby farms and no longer producing food at all. So this is potentially a solution. It's actually recognized by a lot of people in some good research as a possible solution. Now, $10,000. $10,000 is actually very much less than the cost of a staff that we might need to administer this ourselves. There was some thought that we might want to do this ourselves, but we simply don't have the resources in Sooke to administer this ourselves. We can't afford to, and yet we cannot afford not to have food. We can't afford to allow our land to stay fallow and not produce food. Luck favors the prepared. If we actually have an administrative structure in place to accept donations and accept land, there's no doubt that land will appear. If we don't have that structure in place, then we don't have it in place, in which case we don't have farmers and we don't have food. A $10,000 investment on a yearly basis, I think we have to look at what our community members would want. Would they be willing to spend $1.50 on a pretty good bet at better regional food security, or keep that $1.50 so they can buy half a latte or something? A quarter of a latte, I'm sorry. It's not just the price of real estate. It's just everything's going up. Obviously, I'm highly in favor. I do agree with Councillor Logans that we should probably go in principle, since we don't know the exact amount. It's just reasonable to wait till we know what the cost would be. I believe that whatever the cost is, unless they want us to pay the entire $130,000, we've got to be moving on food security. The weather continues to change. We have no idea how long we have. We must have food security.
Okay, thank you, Councillor St-Pierre. So some thoughts are, I guess, as Councillor Logan said, is that we are able to just say that we would support this financially in principle upon clarification of that information. The other option, not to just totally confuse everybody, but in some cases, is that we could say that we support this and that we would review it in a year's time and decide then to opt in. It's similar to like the CRD Art Service. We just joined it this year for the first time, even though the service has been running for a while. So there is that opportunity to observe a process and to join into it at a later date. So I just want to throw that out there as an option. Councillor Beddoes?
I would concur with that. I think that is a very good option. We don't know enough about what's going to go on in this whole system. They talked about acquiring land, and it's not acquiring land. There's too many unknowns, and why don't we just let it sit here and see how they get on with the other municipalities? We don't have to be charging on ahead. I understand, Councillor St-Pierre, I understand we're in a climate crisis, I understand we're in a food crisis. I just want to try and keep it more local. But I like your suggestion. We'll let it sit a year. We don't really have to tell them anything other than we look at it in a year's time. But I think that's a good way forward. I agree.
Councillor McMath?
I would prefer to do in principle, and then when the numbers come back, which is the answers that you're looking for, that I'm looking for too, if we don't like those numbers, then we can leave it for a year and then join it. We're not promising anything, but I do, yeah, I'm not going to sign up for something where we don't have the numbers. So I'm with you on that. But it is a crisis, so if it's a crisis, I don't see, there's no benefit to postponing it for a year. And there's no hardship for doing the in-principle motion.
Okay. Councillor Bateman? And
So I
then
agree
let's
with-
craft something.
I agree with all of the above. I think we do have, this would be consistent to make a motion in principle to support this Foodlands Trust, in that back on February 25th, we did make a general statement of support, as Ms. Mustafa made clear to us, that council support the creation of a regional food lands trust and regional food lands trust acquisition fund. Now, somehow we made that general statement of support, and we've been forgotten by the CRD as they put forward these ideas. So we, in fact, are like Highlands, Sydney, View Royal, and Victoria, in that we have made a general statement of support in support of this program. So maybe we don't have to say it again, or
Well, I think we need
reiterate it.
to just restate it and send it back, because part of the, completing the form was that, we want to hear from the CRD and have these outstanding questions, and then just due to availability and scheduling, that came up today. So that's where, we have been at this a few times, so I think now it's just timely to send something on. Councillor Logans?
And I would like to have the motion say that it supports the CRD operation of Foodlands Trust sorry. What I was reading got deleted, but that's okay. It was something, sorry. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, support in funding the CRD operation of Foodlands Trust in principle.
Okay.
Because I want them to know that we are willing to put forward, potentially willing to put forward a dollar amount with the proper information when it's provided.
Okay, so we can put that into a cover letter then and make that clear, and as well include some of the comments that we had raised. Councillor McMath?
I don't know if this needs to go in the motion, but the CRD park piece on Sooke River Road.
Yeah. This would be the time to write that into our feedback letter. There has been some discussion about that, about the park lands and then sort of shifting into food security, but the board had decided that they're two different initiatives. But I think in context here, it's like, okay, is to shine a light on a property that was farm that is now park, and it may open that discussion there. Councillor St-Pierre?
There seemed to be an implication that it might not be the only property. That was the only one that I knew of, but I forget his name. I'm sorry. Jeff, I was looking for the last name.
Mr. Weightman, yeah.
Mr. Jeff. When Mr. Jeff was speaking, he did seem to imply there might be more than one, so it might be nice to have language that allows us to find out what those other properties might be.
Yeah, or there may not even be within our jurisdiction. There could be many that are in other areas as well. So I think that'll be the piece that we need to write as our comments there. Okay, so in this case here, there's a trust in principle after the first bullet. Is that the one that we didn't need that in there? So we support the CRD operation of a Foodlands Trust, and then the second part is more the in principle part relates to the funding, because we need clarification on what that is.
Yes, and as Councillor Bateman mentioned, we already did put forward the support for the Foodlands Trust, so I think that's okay and clear to have. But then
Yeah.
in regards to the funding, that part should be in principle.
Okay, and then we can draft a letter then that
Yes.
maybe adds a bit more to that, okay? Councillor Beddoes?
I kind of like the way it was before, the CRD, we support the CRD Operation Foodlands Trust in principle, not the second part. I am not in favor of, at this point in time, of even committing to any money until I know further. So if we give just the support in principle, should that not be enough at this particular point in time?
Yes and no. I think part of it is that, because on the form, we could just say we support the Foodlands Trust. We're just not willing to submit any money towards it. But I think I'm sensing a willingness to provide to contribute the funding once we actually know what it is. Because right now, we don't know what the actual number is. So it's the case of, that could be the second part to it. Once we get an answer, we would get correspondence back from the CRD, and then it would come to us, we would discuss it again, and then we would have this discussion.
So we're not committing to anything.
So we're not committing, it's the case of triggering that. Councillor Logans?
Just to add to what Mayor Tate has mentioned, the reason for saying that we would be potentially willing to commit funding is because in that way, they can go back and calculate that into their number. And then they can give us an accurate number. If we don't say that we're potentially willing to provide funding, then they don't know whether or not to include us in that number. So this just makes it clear to them that, yes, we may be willing to participate. But
Yeah. Councillor Beddoes?
But you said potentially, and that's not in that draft. If you put
that's what
potentially.
in principle means.
Well, that's not how I see it, but
Okay. And I'll just share, I totally appreciate where the reservation is coming from. But part of it is looking at the region. So a year or so ago, there was a traffic service that the CRD was looking to establish, and it had board approval, and it went out to municipalities, but municipalities rejected the concept. The downside to that is that regionally, for anyone that commutes, it's a nightmare. We're all going out to bid at different times. There's construction here, construction there, and there's no coordinated effort. And so then as we tried to advocate to the province for funding, it's one jurisdiction after another competing for that attention and competing for the funding. And so now I think with our current government, at least they're doing a whole South Island strategy to look at everything and how that impacts us. But there was an attempt that we need to have better conversations on how traffic flows, because for our commuting population, it's a nightmare. It's terrible. What used to be an hour is now 2 hours. It's a long day for our families that are commuting. So there is a need to coordinate efforts together. And it's similar to this, over the years you hear, well, we're not going to support that, we'll do it here, but then the ball doesn't move, nothing happens, and then it just becomes a problem. So I think this is where I'm supporting this, and we'll get the numbers and we'll get more discussion. But as we're hearing, we have night markets that attract people from other places into our community, and our farmers go out to other communities as well and are back and forth. And we have community members that live here, work elsewhere, and back and forth. And, so it's just part of a regional effort. So we seem to have a motion here, and that is that council directs staff to provide the following feedback to the Capital Regional District regarding the proposed Foodlands Access Program, support the CRD operation of a Foodlands Trust, and willing to participate in funding of CRD operation of Foodlands Trust in principle. And then we'll get more details in the letter, including the piece about parkland that we know. Councillor St-Pierre, moving that. Okay, is there seconded by Councillor Logans? Any further discussions? So we'll get a response and we'll discuss it again. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone, for working through that together. I really appreciate it. Okay, we're almost done. Our last item are some council verbal reports. Before we all start doing this, though, we have a committee of the whole scheduled for next week as an opportunity there for councils to really sort of download and upload some of the things that they're working on. And in particular, we are doing some advocacy pieces with water extension to North Sooke. So that'll be a way just for us to regroup there to see that we're all on the same page. So we're sort of looking at next week as that opportunity. But of course, if there is something pressing, I would encourage you to share it now, or if you need clarification on something that's in the week ahead, you know, to bring that up as well. And then I have one item. Did you have something, Councillor Bateman?
I'll move that we defer verbal reports to the committee of the whole.
Okay. We don't need a mover, apparently.
Okay.
Because it's happening. Okay? Because we're going to be doing that, and
So want to move something.
there
Wait,
is
what did I
still
say?
another item or so.
Oh,
I'll also share that because we were all away at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, there was also a desire from some councillors just to share what they've learned at that convention. And I think that would be important so that members of the public know, you know, why we're going and what we're doing while we're there. And also just to talk about UBCM. So that brings me to one piece for myself that is kind of immediate. I am going to UBCM executive meeting this week, and I do want to put in my nomination papers for the position of UBCM president this year. While the process doesn't require a resolution, it does require 2 signatories on the nomination form. So just like to ask, and sort of doing it now because I'd like to just have everyone as part of it, and having the support really means something to me, so thank you. So. That's great. I will print that off after this meeting, so thank you for that. And so yes, number 14, Councillor Bateman, would you like to move that?
sure, whatever it is. Oh, adjournment.
Okay, is there a seconder? Councillor McMath is second in adjournment, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed is carried unanimously, and thank you everyone for tonight.